Readings January 12th, Genesis 22 and 23, Psalms 26, 27 and 28, Matthew 14. Genesis 22 is one of the most monumental in the life of the father both the faithful, Abraham. We are amazed by the number of high points in this great man's journey in faith, but there is none greater than in this 22nd chapter, cited by Paul in Hebrews 11 verses 17 to 19, which tells us that the incident speaks of resurrection and typically of the beloved, only begotten Son of promise, our Lord Jesus Christ. Abraham is afforded a great privilege in this incident in being able to understand to a small extent how the Father felt when he gave his only begotten Son, because God so loved the world. John 3 verses 16 to 19. The chapter in Genesis emphasizes the oneness that existed between Father and Son, verses 3, 5, 7 to 9, 16, 17, and 19, emblematic of the unity of purpose in our redemption that was between our Sovereign and His incomparable Son. The chapter indicated that this was a trial, or testing of Abraham, because of the preciousness of a faith that has overcome. Abraham could have rationalized the Almighty does not mean what He has asked of men, since the fulfillment of the promise is to be through Isaac. Or alternatively, he said, I don't know why God has asked me to offer my son, but I trust Him, who cannot fail those whose trust is in Him. But the trauma and the wrestling with his thoughts. All night long, that is why Abraham, with steely resolve, rose early in the morning. This expression in the Bible speaks of determination sometimes for good, as here and in Yahweh's sending of the prophets to aid His people, or for evil as in the episode of the golden calf. Everything was prepared beforehand in readiness by Abraham, who was most likely numbed by the daunting task ahead of him. Though he knew not how it would be, yet Abraham was confident that both he and Isaac would come back to the place where they left their companions, Hebrews telling us Abraham's expectation was that Isaac would be raised from the dead. Note that the journey to the place of sacrifice was of 3 days, representing the 3-year ministry that would see our Lord undertake, with His Father's help, to Calvary. It also no doubt relates to the death of Isaac and is symbolic of Jesus being in the grave for 3 days. We see the cooperation between father and son. Isaac was totally compliant with his father's will, which as a man of about 30 years of age, and a father who was 130 years old, it was because the son understood the need that the father's will be done. We can hear God's Son in Gethsemane. Not as I will, but thy will be done. The place of Isaac's offering has 2 names in this chapter. 1, Moriah, meaning Yahweh will provide, and 2, Yahweh Yair, meaning Yahweh will be seen, teaching us that in the redemptive act symbolized by Abraham requiring Isaac's submission to the Father's will. As Abraham raised the knife to slay his son, he was stopped by the voice of the angel preventing the sacrifice, as verses 11 to 12 tell us. Though Abraham was allowed to spare his only beloved son, Yahweh did not spare His own Son. Slowly read aloud Romans 8 verses 31 to 39. Reflect deeply on what these words are teaching us about the love of our Sovereign and His Son towards us. God has already vastly exceeded any gift He has given believers. The greatest work has already been done in providing a basis for our forgiveness and the extension of divine grace. We may be assured that if the Father has given His Son, then what remains to bring us into His kingdom is comparatively incidental. Yahweh now sealed an oath on His own existence that Abraham's promise is immutable. Hebrews 6 verses 13 to 20. Abraham's seed would possess the gate of his enemies, indicating, firstly, Christ's victory over sin and death, 1 Corinthians 15 verses 12 to 28, and secondly, the subjugation of all nations to His rule in the coming kingdom. The chapter concludes with details of children being born to Nahor, Abraham's brother, in Haran. Chapter 23 of Genesis tells of Sarah's death and burial in the cave of Machpelah, meaning enfolded the burial place of 3 generations of the faithful patriarchal families Sarah and Abraham, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah, in Beersheba, the well of the covenant. The irony being that Abraham, who by promise owned the land of Israel, had to buy a burial place for his wife. See Acts 7 verses 4 and 5. Psalm 26 tells us David's love for his God. The psalmist delights in every opportunity to extol the virtues of his sovereign. David also tells of his detesting of the ways of the wicked. Psalm 27 speaks of the Lord being the light, revealer of what is right and honorable, and salvation, the process of saving and bringing to his kingdom of the faithful believers. The writer tells of the Almighty's capacity to defend the upright. He speaks of his Creator's pull on the writer's heart to seek fellowship with his God. And the psalm concludes with a love and loyalty to his God which exceeds that of any human bond. David encourages himself in the assurance that his God will not see him abandoned into the hand of his foes. Wait, he says, on Yahweh, you will never be disappointed by taking this course. Psalm 28 says that Yahweh is the strength and shield of the psalmist. The thoughts are similar to God's consoling promise to Abraham at the start of Genesis 15. The confidence of knowing God is always with and surrounding his children with his all-powerful arms. Yahweh will repay both the wicked and the righteous according to their works. Romans 2 verses 5 to 11. The response that such understanding generates in God's people is outlined in verses 6 to 9. Slowly read aloud, and pause and ponder. In chapter 14 of Matthew, Herod is struck with terror on hearing of the miracles of Jesus. Herod Antipas, a convert of the Sadducees, and therefore a non-believer in the resurrection of the dead, was convinced that John the Baptist had been raised from the dead. Our Lord is told of John's brutal decapitation and in response responds by seeking solitude to reflect. This is interrupted by a multitude seeking him out, and he compassionately responds to their need of a shepherd to teach them. He feeds 5,000 of them and heals many. John 6 tells us that their desire was to take him by force and make him their king. Jesus summarily dispersed the crowd and went into a mountain to pray. He sent the apostles by boat to the other side of the lake. When the storm arose, he came to them walking on the water. Peter alone showed the faith and courage to briefly do likewise. He was rescued by his master. Finally, upon reaching the other side of the lake, Jesus healed many at Gennesaret. Penned by Warwick Rosser and his team and produced by Christadelphinvideo.org.